There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Okay, welcome to Media Mothership here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM. This is episode 97, as we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. We're broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania, as well as streaming on edgeradio.org.au, YouTube and Twitch. You can find us by searching Media Mothership on YouTube or Twitch. Message us into the studio directly at 0488811707, or feel free to leave a message on the chat via Twitch or YouTube. As always, I'm your host, Craig Norris, and today's topic, we're picking up where we dropped off last week around the idea of understanding storytelling by diving into some further ideas of genre, in particular applying them to the new refreshing of storytelling coming out of DC Comics with their absolute line of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and the variation on these classic superhero figures that's occurring in the new absolute version of these characters. And we'll be applying some theories of genre storytelling as outlined by Eric R. Williams in his theory book, How to View and Appreciate Great Movies. So we're going to apply some of his theories of understanding genre to hopefully explaining what DC Comics are attempting to do with these new versions of these classic characters, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, as well as how they're attempting to keep some parts of the typical kind of genre expectations we'd have for these characters, but then subvert them as well. And we'll see how that effort is transpiring with some examples and discussion coming out of the comic book community concerning these absolute characters. So keep listening here to Media Mothership as we'll dive into that topic of genre and the absolute universe in DC Comics. All right, so before we dive too far forward into this, let's have a look at some key terms, right? Let's define some key terms and kind of break up how we can understand the significance of looking at genre in terms of these comics. So first, let's kind of break down what we mean by the types of theories we're going to apply. So dipping into the ideas of Williams and movie watching, he breaks down three categories of genre. So you have a super genre, which he lists 11 examples of. The one we're going to be looking at is the action genre, which is pretty much the kind of uber genre that a lot of superhero storytelling falls within. The action genre usually has, again, continuing Williams's idea that to understand what a super genre is, you look at the atmosphere, the character, and the story expectations of an audience approaching that. So a typical action genre piece of work will typically have some kind of intense and dynamic, fast-paced atmosphere. So you kind of Die Hard film where there's a type of a heist movie occurring where Bruce Willis's cop character is trying to save these hostages. So there's a sense of urgency in the atmosphere. There's a sense of excitement as he's heroically trying to sort these high stakes, right? Action films have high stakes. The setting often involves a type of a battle, chases, car chases and rescues. So again, Die Hard, certainly constant kind of cat and mouse battles between the Bruce Willis, John McClane character and the terrorists, as well as the high stakes trying to save the hostages. Often visually striking pieces of work action genre films are. So they'll have tons of explosions, tons of stunts, and a lot of special effects. In terms of characters, we'd expect to see in an action genre piece, typically you're looking at a heroic protagonist. The main character is going to be quite brave. They're going to be very skilled and determined. So again, think of your John McClane and Die Hard character, and physically strong. They're able to do combat. So there's also clear antagonists that they're fighting against. A really clear villain. In the case of Die Hard, it's the Grubner, Carl Grubner, I think the character is, who's the mastermind, kind of hostage taker, political terrorist kind of cover story, bank heist character, and then supporting characters. So, in Die Hard, you've got allies for Bruce Willis's character, the beat cop outside, the chauffeur that drove him there, and then you've got, each one of those has unique skills. And stories, of course, in action films, we're thinking of conflict and confrontation, where the protagonist is going to have a number of obstacles they have to overcome. In Die Hard, trying to whittle down the henchmen of the key character, try and rescue the hostages and so forth. And each one of those comes with certain obstacles that need to be overtaken. Action-packed sequences, Die Hard has that great sequence where he leaps from the building with the fire hose wrapped around him as that floor explodes behind him. Classic scenes. The helicopters approaching. So again, those are the typical beats we'd be expecting. So for this, when we're looking at a superhero film, the big genre would be often looking at is how does it work as an action film? What are our expectations when we're going into a superhero film? Again, we'd probably be thinking there'd be a heroic protagonist. There'll probably be a lot of high stakes narrative there, a kind of end of the world scenario. Clear antagonist. There'll be a comic book villain who's the counterpoint, who's the big threat to the superheroes. So it could be the Joker character fighting against Batman, Lex Luthor for Superman, and so forth. And you're assuming you're going to get tons of action-packed sequences. So again, we'll have a look at how Williams explains it now, in terms of their approach to unpacking the super genre, and then within that, further delving down into the ideas of a macro genre and micro genre. So, for instance, you might have the macro genre being action, but the macro genre, like if it's a Batman film, you'd be thinking there might be some detective storytelling going on there, which would be a macro genre. What type of detective analysis or storytelling is going on there? If it's a kind of gritty film, femme fatale, it could be a noir micro genre, or the character could be hard boiled, right? A character who is kind of burnt out, detective character that's burnt out by the world around us. So again, these are categories where we can further dive into it. But let's hear Williams's way of defining it through his key terms.
The expectations conveyed by certain kinds of films. You might call them genres, but I'd like to use a little bit more nuance in our conversation. So we'll start by differentiating between what I like to call macro genres, and micro genres. And I'll show you how audience expectations can be met and subverted by combining macro genres with the 11 super genres. By the end of this lecture, I hope to demonstrate how these three simple concepts, super genres, macro genres, and micro genres, how they work together to create the expectations that we have for nearly any feature film you'll see in the theaters today. A tall order, I know, but once you understand the inner workings of these tools, you'll be able to really understand why and how stories are shaped specifically for their audiences. And once you can see these patterns and these techniques, you'll be better able to appreciate the work being done behind the scenes to create a great heist movie. Or was it an escape movie? Because there is a difference, you know. To start, let's take a step back. In a previous lecture, I outlined in detail the idea that there are 11 supergenres. 11.
So we'll just pause it there. I mean, there's an interesting justification that Williams is giving here as to why it's useful to know about this theory of genres, and then not only understand why what a genre is, but dive more deeply into it to look at this idea of breaking it apart as, okay, does this movie we're watching, what's the super genre it's fitting into? Then what are the sub-genres that are going on? If it's an action film, okay, what type of action film it is? Well, it's Chinatown, so it's a detective action film, right? We're going to have a main protagonist who's trying to solve some mystery. All right, what type of... So the super genre would be action, macro genre would be detective, and the micro genre could be, hard-boiled. So the character that Jack Nicholson plays in Chinatown is a really kind of hard-boiled detective. That is, his previous experiences in Chinatown have burnt him out. He's grizzled, he's pessimistic, he has a cynical look on the world around him. And again, those are those three spaces. And Williams argues that if we get it, and if we start understanding how, before we went to see Chinatown, or when we read some reviews about Chinatown, they were cluing us in, okay, it's going to be a detective film. That sets up a series of expectations we've got in terms of what we'd be expecting to see. So if a film's being hyped up and the poster looks like it's going to be a really cool action film, again, we'd be expecting that, okay, there's going to be a character in there who's a hero, and there's going to be a villain. The atmosphere is going to be intense. I'm assuming there's going to be some chase scenes or a rescue scene or something. And the story's all going to be conflict-based, right? The hero and the villain are going to be constantly fighting and battling each other. With tons of action. So those, again, my expectations. And when we see a film fail or a film succeed, it could be because they're not living up to these expectations that maybe we're conscious of or not. Equally, we might watch something where we're really surprised because we thought we were seeing an action film, but then halfway through, wow, this film took a complete turn, and actually it's a horror. Right, so Dusk Till Dawn is a great example of that, where it starts off as a heist film with George Clooney and Tarantino playing two bank robbers, and then at the end of Act 1, suddenly, the bar they go to after they've stolen the money turns out to be inhabited by vampires, and then it just shifts into a different genre of vampire film horror. So suddenly it's, the previous expectations we had around an action film can get recalibrated. It could pose some questions about, maybe the limitations of the action film genre. So can it be clever? So again, that's why Williams is arguing it's really useful to look at. So then if we pick him up now with where he sees this whole significance going to.
Action, crime, fantasy, horror, life, romance, science fiction, sports, thriller, war, and Western.
Yep, sorry. So that's the 11 supergenres. So he says, basically all films are going to fit into one of those 11 supergenres. And again, what we're talking about here, and he defends this by saying, okay, so this can appear to be really uncreative and kind of stifling and like, wow, what's the point if there's only 11 genres? That seems really reductive. But he's saying, okay, just get this as part of the business of filmmaking and also the expectations that people have before they go in. Don't see it as a straitjacket, see it as something, well, let's see how they subvert that, or let's see how they are able to perform those genre cues strongly, right? So he's saying actually it can be a way of shorthand, so an audience can jump straight into a film without having as much setup as you'd need. And equally, it could be a way where an audience, you're playing and manipulating what they're thinking they're about to have, but then bait and switch into something else.
And each of these 11 supergenres is defined by 3 specific elements: atmosphere, character, and story. For instance, crime films typically explore themes of truth, justice, and freedom, and contain the central conflict of criminal versus lawman. Of course, the criminal can exist in a variety of forms. Someone who is intentionally breaking the law, accidentally breaking the law, or circumstantially breaking the law, but for seemingly heroic purposes. Similarly, the lawman might also appear in various guises. It might be the story of a lawyer, members of a jury, a valiant police officer, or a vengeful victim of some crime. Regardless, crime films make the audience jump through a series of mental hoops as we watch this battle between criminals and those intent on stopping them. Now, of course, the hoops look different in each movie, but don't be fooled. You've seen them a million times. They're either trying to solve the crime along with the detective, or we're figuring out how the complex heist might fall apart. We're imagining how the convict is going to escape, or how the lawyer is going to win a conviction at the trial.
Right, so I think we get the idea here that what we're looking at is trying to unpack what the story is we're enjoying in terms of, okay, what genre is it part of? So we talked about how we're going to have a look at superhero comics, and they would probably fall into a bigger genre that could be referred to as an action film. So if this superhero comic is going to be an action-based story, again, we'd be expecting intense, dramatic, dynamic sequences, high stakes, heroic protagonists, clear villains, team of supporting characters. The storyline's going to be conflict and confrontation with action-packed sequences. So let's jump now into this new DC Absolute universe and what they're attempting to do here. Because again, I think we can see that we'd have expectations about what a comic book superhero story is going to have for us. And what's interesting is at this moment when you've got a company like DC who launch a new storyline where they reimagine these characters, it's a great opportunity to say, okay, what subversions are they doing to these characters and the genres they fit within, right? So we'll have a look at some of the buzz that's going on with the new Absolute series. We'll start by having a look at some of the discussions which are set up around it. So we'll start by listening to some of the fan commentary about what's going on here. So let's hear about what this Absolute universe is all about. So this is a short clip that's breaking apart the Absolute universe.
In August 2024, DC announced a new initiative, DC All In, made so that everyone could enter to read comics. This new brand in the editorial was announced with different issues, beginning with Special Number 1. This follows the end of the Absolute Power event. In this Special Number 1, we had a 64 pages comic that was a flipbook. On one side, until the middle, we focus on Superman and the formation of a new Justice League. From the other side, until the middle, we focus on Darkseid. As well as Superman is the main important being of the continuity, and from his energy emerges all the universe, Darkseid is also the main being of a parallel universe. A universe he died to form, the Absolute Universe.
All right, so we have this idea of DC's launched this new universe. We've got a bit of storytelling there that the fan is picking up in terms of we have this typically a villain character, Darkseid, who's gone into a parallel world and created it. And all the heroes now have an aspect of their typical story removed and reinvented. So we'll start with Batman and unpack how some of the fans are reacting and describing the new version of Absolute Batman. I mean, before we do that, let's think firstly what the classic Batman is in terms of, I guess if we're putting the super genre of a Batman as action based, and within that the macro genre would be crime, and you could argue then the micro genre is a detective crime story with maybe vigilante justice as another micro genre. So the atmosphere we'd be expecting to see in any Batman story would be dark, gritty, usually gothic. Gotham City's this crime-ridden, corrupt metropolis. For any of the characters, we'd assume all the characters are going to be brooding, complex, driven by some kind of personal vendetta against crime, right? So obviously Bruce Wayne's character's parents died by crime, so he's got a personal vendetta about it, and many other characters have been affected by crime. Batman would be expecting to see him as a master detective, super cool martial artist, lone vigilante character, and the stories are going to be ones of like justice, vengeance, maybe a little bit of exploration of the psychological toll of being a hero, some complex moral questions. So let's see how the absolute story takes those expectations we'd have of a classic Batman story and twist them. And obviously within that classic Batman story, as it would be focusing on a figure, we'd be assuming we'd have a Bruce Wayne who's a billionaire playboy, who's using all his wealth and resources to fight crime in Gotham City, and he's got high-tech gadgets and like the Batmobile and the Batcave, right? So we'd be thinking, okay, so a character is probably going to be that guy. So let's see how some of the fans are unpacking the genre twists that seem to be emerging in this new absolute universe with Batman.
In August 2024, DC announced a new initiative, DC All In.
All right, hold on, we'll cue this up properly.
In August 2024, DC announced a new initiative, DC.
How do you live on $50 a day?
Let me cue it up. Let me just grab it. Yep, so what we're going to listen to here are some ways in which fans have unpacked the concept of Batman in the
new
DC
Absolute
universe.
Batman is ruthless. So the new Absolute Universe is giving us a completely different take on Batman, where he's a working class engineer and his mother is still alive. But that's not the biggest change they made, because this version of Batman is a 6'6", 250-pound monster. He's also just as intelligent as the normal Batman, having studied in mechanics, chemistry, criminal psychology, military theory, and much more. Not to mention that he's trained in Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing. His deadly combination of size and intelligence meant that on his very first night out as Batman, he was easily able to 1v25 his opponents. And since this Bruce Wayne is an engineer, he's still designed every single part of his batsuit to be potentially lethal, including the bat symbol on his chest that unfolds to become a battle axe. Absolute Batman is also much more cruel-tempered than the usual one, having no issues with literally cutting off his opponent's limbs or shooting them in the face with shrapnel, which is why I'm extremely excited for these upcoming issues so that we can see just how far this new Absolute Batman is willing to go.
All right, so this fan, Euphoric is positioning this new Absolute Batman as being a hyper version of the existing expectations we would have of Batman, right? That he is, that this is an even grittier, darker version of Batman. He's more hyper masculine. He's stronger. He's got a battle axe that comes out of his chest insignia. And Gotham is even more hopeless than the one we have in the normal comic. So it's certainly in terms of atmosphere, he's saying it's meeting all the beats we'd expect in a Batman story as an action genre and dialing it to 11. But we'll see. I mean, I think some other YouTube reactions have kind of unpacked it with some other variations, which are also interesting. So let's listen here to Sammy the Monster unpacking what she thinks is going on with this new genre. Well, maybe some of the subversiveness of the new Batman Absolute.
What exactly are Batman's powers? Is it the resources that come along with him being rich, like all the gadgets and stuff? Is it the fact that he is a genius, the world's greatest detective? Or is it the fact that he is a technically skilled fighter, basically a ninja?
So what she's setting up there is the idea of, okay, so like we were saying, what are the genre expectations we have of a Batman story? And within that, of course, how do we define characters within the Batman story? And, what's Batman's power? So she's just mapping out there what we typically expect to see for Batman, right? Is it his wealth? Is it his skills? Is it his detective powers? Then we'll hear how she moves into the absolute Batman story.
But what would it look like if Batman wasn't rich? How would he support himself? How would he have access to all of this gear? How would he be Batman? Well, this concept is actually explored in Absolute Batman, and issue 1 just dropped this month. This is kicking off the new Absolute Universe from DC Comics, and Wonder Woman just dropped as well, and this was phenomenal. But today we're talking about Absolute Batman issue 1. I know there's some mixed opinions on this logo, but keep in mind this is actually an axe head that he wears on his chest, in which he could wield. He literally has the handle, and he just attaches it to his chest, and there we go. We got a Batman axe. Another cool thing is that the ears of his costume is actually removable, and they are throwing knives. So yes, in this universe, Batman is not rich. His mother is a social worker, and his father is a teacher, and his father is killed in front of him as a child, but his mother is still alive and raised him, so he's not completely an orphan. And in this continuity, he's pretty young. I think he's like 22 or 23 here. He's a genius like he always is. I mean, he is the world's greatest detective. He goes to college. He does pretty well in college. He's actually a football player in college and gives it all up to, I assume, be Batman, the vigilante of Gotham. Bruce is not rich, which means he does not have a butler, so where is Alfred? Well, he's actually not a butler at all in this continuity. He is a secret agent who does not know Bruce at all yet, but they are starting to cross paths in this issue, playing a little game of cat and mouse, and the question is, will they be allies or will they be enemies? Since Batman does not have money, it makes Bruce way more creative on how he gets the resources that he needs to be the vigilante of Gotham, to be Batman. So pretty cool stuff. I can't wait to see that further explored in the next few issues, to see how he's accessing everything that he needs. Like, how is he getting this suit? How is he getting all these weapons? I always respect a brand new take on these classic characters, and I'm excited to see where it goes with Spy Alfred. Gordon's actually the mayor, and just Batman with no money. Let's see how it plays out. Yeah, really cool first issue. Wonder Woman, Absolute Wonder Woman also just came out this week, and that was like literally phenomenal. Absolute Batman is written by Scott Snyder and illustrated by Nick Dragotta. Final cool comic book shop near you.
All right, so there she's diving much more explicitly into, I guess, the difference that people are pointing out with this Batman, that he's not rich, that this Batman is poor, his mum's still alive, and his mum's a social worker. His dad was killed in a crime scene that Bruce Wayne was prisoned for as a student in his class during an active shooter event at a zoo. So it's interesting what we're seeing here again. Those two fan reviews of Batman Absolute or Absolute Batman are very much hitting the points that, in terms of genre expectations for Batman, the atmosphere is an extension of that genre expectation that we'd have for where Batman sits. That is, it's the gritty atmosphere. So in terms of atmosphere, it's continuing the setting of Gotham as a gritty, decayed environment. The storytelling is still the same in terms of we've got struggles against crime occurring, concerns around safety and wealth, but in this case, it's a working class Batman. He's still, and as far as character is concerned, the character Batman is the same. He's the same self-made hero that we'd recognize in any other Batman story. He's intellectually superior, and he's physically superior to most humans. So the main difference, it seems, is the type of story around Batman's character. That what if you remove the wealth from Batman, what story do we end up with? How does that play out? But in terms of, so there could be some subversiveness there. And you could make an interesting argument that it's trying to update that for contemporary issues around class and wealth and poverty in today's world by removing Batman's money and having him pack that down. The other thing that I guess is interesting is fans asking if this is a really hyper-violent Batman. One fan posted on, does Absolute Batman have the no-kill rule? In terms of genre expectations and character expectations within a crime film, violence is such a key part of that within the action genre, and then detective and kind of dystopic universe of Batman. So we'll hear quickly about this idea of Batman's no violence rule in the Absolute Universe. So this is a piece by the
Absolute
fan
Batman
Dan.
has the no-kill rule. To begin with, I thought he was going to do away with it, considering his bat symbol clips off and becomes a battle axe. But during his first appearance, when he fought against the party animals, in the shadows lurked Alfred Pennyworth, who at the time was just there to observe, and if anything besides the party animals showed up, he was to engage. So when Bruce shows up and dismantles everybody, the first thing that Alfred observes is the fact that, despite chopping off people's hands, Bruce was missing every vital artery in his victims. So while Bruce is out here kicking people in the chest and reducing their rib cages to paste, in the process of doing that, he's also making sure that he doesn't kill these people. And actually, to hammer home the point that he doesn't have the no-kill rule, when Alfred tries to sneak up behind him and headshot Bruce with some sort of special shotgun, Bruce steals said gun, and then later on in the issue, when Alfred gets his favorite gun back, he gets shot in the face with it, revealing that Bruce repurposed it to be non-lethal and shoot little batarangs. And the best part about this interaction is, instead of getting frustrated at his defeat, Alfred actually becomes incensed by Bruce's crusade.
So
What exactly are Batman's
hold on. What's interesting here is most of the fans, again, engaging in a genre level with satisfaction that the Absolute Batman, if anything, is meeting all of the genre expectations of Batman, and then increasing their grittiness and darkness of them. The subversive element is that reimagining of Bruce Wayne without his wealth and resources. As that one of the fans was saying, after issue 1, it would be fascinating to see how this character is able to explain the equipment they've got. If it's so clearly established the mum's just a social worker, single mum now after the death of the father, how are they in a position of being able to afford this? So again, there's going to be some interesting ways in which that story could possibly deal with that subversion of Batman no longer as a billionaire playboy and focusing more on this kind of maybe raw struggle with crime, survival and resilience aspect of, again, genre conventions that we'd have within a gritty action superhero, crime, detective, vigilante, justice story. Let's move on and dig out where Superman is within this universe. So obviously, in terms of expectations we'd have of classic Superman, is that he's raised in Smallville, Kansas, by the Kents, so a human family, mother and father dropped him in. Classically, he embodies hope, justice, and stereotypically the American way. His powers come from Earth's yellow sun, and he's got this inner struggle between his dual identity of Clark Kent and Superman. So let's see how Superman takes those ideas and shifts them. I mean, obviously, also in terms of if we're thinking of a Superman story, the genres would be thinking of, if we're staying within that super genre of action, then we might be thinking, of course, it's going to be a superhero story. It could be sci-fi, right? More science fiction based with an alien invasion, micro-genre story, technology battles and so forth. So maybe a little more SF. Let's hear how the fandom have reviewed Absolute Superman and have unpacked what his story is. Do we still have all those beats? Do we still have that character? What are the subversions going on? So here we'll hear from Comic Origins.
Superman changes everything you thought you knew about Superman. Unlike the Prime Superman who arrived on Earth as a baby, this Superman grew up on Krypton, a planet ruled by the ruthless Science League and a brutal caste system. Here, the iconic S symbol doesn't stand for hope. It's a badge of shame, forced on the lower classes. Superman's parents are brilliant but broken by the system. His mother, Lara Lorvan, was banned from applying to the Science League because of a controversial essay she wrote when she was just 9. And his father, Jor-El, a brilliant scientist, was robbed of his opportunity when he condemned the Science League for environmental recklessness, which would later destroy the planet. Unlike Unlike the others, the Superman family wear the S symbol with pride and carry a legacy of defiance. In this version of Superman, who was created when Darkseid created his own universe...
All right, so that's interesting. The Absolute Superman story may be picking up similar to Absolute Batman with an inversion of, subverting the wealthy figure for him to be a working class with being raised by a single mum story. Here we have Superman not being raised in Kansas, Smallville, by the Kents, but instead he doesn't leave Krypton until he's an early teen, and he'd been raised already by his Kryptonian parents. But clearly this Krypton is dystopic. Right? This is a dystopic Krypton with a very strict class system, as that fan was pointing out, and Superman's family actually belongs to the lowest class, the working class, the labor guild. And this version, again, is emphasizing this idea of instead of Superman being a kind of overpowered super being, he's got these working class roots, and as we'll hear with some other fans unpacking the story, he's trying to struggle against this systemic oppression which he experienced as a young teen in Krypton as well. The atmosphere, of course, of classic Superman, you'd expect to have an atmosphere full of hope and optimism. The metropolis location that it's often set in is hyper-modern. Characters that we're going to be expected to see in a Superman certainly are heroic characters, are going to be noble, altruistic. Superman himself has these kind of godlike powers and is this epitome of ideal hero. At the moment, again, no mention of that dual identity of Clark Kent, so that inner struggle that plays an important part of the character we'd be assuming to see in a Superman film is not there. Themes of justice, hope are certainly baked in, probably even more aggressively now, into this more dystopic, oppressive world which the Absolute Superman story is located within. And given, I guess, that Superman's depicted as part of this lower class in Krypton, that he's a labor son of Krypton, emphasizing this working class struggle, probably is going to emphasize, again, this shift of tone for class struggle, fighting against oppression, societal barriers, rather than big sci-fi global alien invasion threats. But let's unpack it with some other reactions of fans reviewing the Absolute Superman story.
Absolute Superman is a weird comic. This is a story with some pretty cool art by Rafa Sandoval, and you have Jason Aaron, which I really like as Punisher, but that doesn't stop this Superman from being weird. This story has a lot of political undertones in it, but the main theme seems to be classism, how the people at the top take advantage and belittle the people at the bottom. In this universe, Krypton had multiple different classes or branches of a social hierarchy. The scientists were at the top, they had the most power, they made all the big decisions, while the laborers were at the bottom. They had no power, they just worked. Lara and Jor-El were laborers. And the S emblem actually represents that faction, which is pretty cool. And we find out that contrary to main continuity, in this universe, Kal-El was actually old enough to remember his parents. He wasn't just a baby that got sent off. He was like a teenager, and they were a family. They even had a dog. And in the present day, we see Superman helping out a bunch of diamond miners who are being abused and manipulated by a gang of peacemakers. I like this comic. I like the start for the story. It just doesn't feel like Superman. I don't know. I just really like it.
So that's interesting. Again,
who is Absolute Superman, and what makes it...
this fan, Shine Comics, saying, really enjoying it in terms of the atmosphere, character, and story, but he can't quite put his finger on what is not Superman about it, right? So it could be the story that it's, again, not a story about global threats. It's maybe the character that Superman here is this working class character established in Krypton first, not part of a science upper class community. The atmosphere is quite dystopic and oppressive. So again, we've got none of that metropolis setting. which is, you know, a shining beacon of a super modern city that's under threat. We're looking at, you know, as you say, the first issue is all about a diamond mine and Superman trying to help the oppressed workers there. So it's interesting that, you know, while, you know, we've got Absolute Superman embodying some of those core ideas of hope and justice that certainly fit the superhero macro genre, the powers and origin story, the origin story is slightly shifted, that he's a working class hero and an oppressed working class hero that's aware of the oppression that he suffered. So maybe that's it. That subversion, again, that subversion is about, you know, feeling a little unsure as to whether you're going to enjoy this because you're being subverted, that you've got a typical portrayal previously had been a near perfect hero, right? But instead we've got this socioeconomic challenge. He's a working class, he's facing working class struggles and through those working class roots he has, and it's specifically about fighting that oppression. Let's dig a bit deeper in. So here's another fan review talking about who Absolute Superman is. Their headline is Superman. Who is Superman? Absolute Superman, the answer will shock you. This is from 1 Minute Story.
Who is Absolute Superman and what makes him so powerful? Let's break it down. Absolute Superman was born out of the Absolute Power crossover event, but this isn't the Superman you know. Raised by Kryptonian farmers, this version of Kal-El is far more dangerous and far more powerful. Instead of drawing energy from Earth's yellow sun, Absolute Superman charges his body with the red sunstone of Krypton. This amplifies his strength, speed, and durability to insane levels. But here's where it gets crazy. His solar powers have evolved. His heat vision is now apocalyptic. He can unleash concentrated beams of solar energy from his eyes, enough to incinerate nearly anything in his path. But there's a catch. He has to recharge at night, leaving a small window of vulnerability. So is Absolute Superman the strongest version yet? Let me know what you think in the comments.
So it's interesting picking up that idea of is Absolute Superman the strongest version of the Superman. Counterpointing that are a number of fans that are reviewing this saying, you know, this Superman can't control his powers, it seems, right? He has this really interesting relationship with his suit, which is not just fabric or kind of super fabric. It seems to be AI, self-aware. So let's hear this one guy, Dan, unpack the Absolute Superman can't control his powers discussion.
Superman can't control his superpowers. In fact, his suit, which is said to be made from the ashes of Krypton, not only helps him regulate his solar radiation intake, but in addition to that, it also assists in helping him shut down whenever a power like his heat vision goes on the fritz, showing all of us that this version of Superman doesn't have a handle on his abilities. Because honestly, they look a lot more raw, which we can definitely expect to come from the fact that he didn't have the guiding hands of the Kents growing up, considering this version of Superman actually knew Jor-El and Laura Lore. So instead of him hitting puberty on the Kent farm and burning a hole through a barn, he showed up on Earth as a teenager and possibly did worse, considering when we saw the Kent farm in issue number 1, it was destroyed and has been overtaken by Lazarus Corp, which makes me believe that either the Kents actually tried the experiment and it failed horribly, or Darkseid removed the love from Superman's life completely, which is not an outlandish assumption. Darkseid already turned his house symbol into that of garbage, so I would not be surprised if he doubled down by going after the Kents too.
This is what.
Yeah, so again, some interesting subversions of the Superman narrative. And again, that fan picking up some really interesting beats instead of a kind of optimistic hope atmosphere that we'd have. He's pointing out that actually, in terms of a Superman story within a superhero genre, the atmosphere is really dystopic. And in this version, the S symbol is actually a class symbol that is referring to the lowest caste that Superman's family was part of. That it appears he, as this fan is saying, you know, it appears that Superman has been raised without love in terms of, you know, the death of his parents on Krypton, the experience he had immediately in Earth. It doesn't seem to be this rooting within the Kents that was humanizing Superman. So again, interesting shift there around genre expectations with action when we're dealing with a heroic ideal character, godlike powers like Superman, taking that and again giving this class struggle narrative, which is fascinating. We've got a few minutes left, so let's dip quickly into Wonder Woman. Now, typically with Wonder Woman's story, we're looking at a central character, Wonder Woman or Diana, who's this Amazonian princess from Themyscira. And they embody this, strength, compassion. They have a mission of peace, and she's bridging these two worlds, the human world and the divine world. So let's have a look how that's inverted or subverted or further extended in the absolute universe. And clearly with genre expectations with Wonder Woman, again, seeing it as an action film primarily or an action text primarily within that superhero. But as opposed to the other two, Superman and Batman, we might be expecting some more fantasy elements, particularly from the mythological and type of ancient warrior vibe that Wonder Woman has as an Amazonian character linked with Greek mythology and so forth. So let's have a look at some fan reviews of Absolute Wonder Woman.
Absolute Wonder Woman by Kelly Thompson, Hayden Sherman, and Jordie Bellaire has finally dropped, and after one issue, I feel confident in saying that this is the best thing to happen to the character in well over a decade. Now, much like everyone else in the Absolute DC universe, Wonder Woman has been reimagined from the ground up, in this case, quite literally. Here, instead of being the princess to an island of mythical warrior women, Diana is raised by the goddess Circe in Hell. Meanwhile, the Amazons are facing some sort of eternal damnation because Zeus said so. But for whatever reason, Diana was not punished alongside them. Instead, she was dumped on Circe's doorstep by Apollo, who's like, well, you're a mom now, peace. And the whole issue is about motherhood. It's about patriarchal torment. So in that, it's thematically very in keeping with classic Wonder Woman comics, but the presentation is Wonder Woman meets Berserk, and I think that combination works like peanut butter and chocolate, and I can't wait to see where the book goes from here.
The marketing for Absolute Wonder Woman has leaned a lot into how hardcore this version is. Raised in hell, a witch, giant sword, riding a skeleton death Pegasus. But inside the pages of Absolute Wonder Woman, at times, Diana can be outright cute. Absolute Wonder Woman is part of DC Comics' Absolute Universe, which launched in late 2024, and it's alternate takes on various DC characters, born out of a dark side universe. And issue 2 of Absolute Wonder Woman saw Diana meet Steve Trevor, and she's super into him. So much so that when she has to look up at him, she actually blushes. Is this the cutest Wonder Woman moment? It's definitely softer than some may have expected, especially going into this series, because
Absolute Wonder
That's interesting around the ideas of genre expectations, given that now we're having genre expectations of the Absolute Universe being hyper violent and dark and gritty. Interesting, a romance twist maybe. So we're seeing maybe a micro genre of romance that this fan's pointing out in issue 2 of Absolute Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman's blushing. So this idea of subverting maybe the expectations of the Absolute Universe, that we have a romance dimension of love, as we're pointing out with the Superman, Absolute Superman. It seems absent of love, while the main subversion within the Wonder Woman character seems to be the different interpretation of her fantasy upbringing. Instead of from the Amazonian background, she's now raised in hell, and obviously darker and grittier. But within that, again, this subgenre of a potential romance narrative is intriguing. In terms of atmosphere, again, that I think much like the other stories we've looked at with Batman and Superman, it's continuing the mythological epic atmosphere of Wonder Woman. We've got strong, compassionate warrior character. A mission of peace thing isn't being engaged with at this point, but we'll see. And the story as well, empowerment, justice, clashes between ancient traditions and modern values. Yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting if it does get dealt with, but I couldn't detect anything in the discussions there. It seems that, Wonder Woman is continuing to embody the strength of the compassionate warrior, and it has that strong mythological background. So we'll hear the one or two more other reviews of it. So let's listen to one or two more others to get a further handle on Absolute Wonder Woman.
Absolute Wonder Woman is still Diana of Themyscira, but this time around, she's the Princess of Hell. Because the way that Diana first ends up in Hell revolves around Zeus. Diana, the Princess of Themyscira, was taken away by Zeus as a punishment to the Amazons for their crimes against the gods, leaving Diana in none other than the care of Circe, who at first has zero intention of mothering Diana. In fact, she's fully prepared to let the kid fend for herself until baby Diana grabs a snake that was meant to kill her and yeets it across the room. Impressed by that, Circe starts to realize that this kid is special. So she begins to train Diana, blending Amazonian strength with dark mystical powers. And honestly, what was really enjoyable was seeing Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman capture Circe's reluctant journey into motherhood with this nice mix of humor and intensity. But by far the best moment of this issue was when Diana discovers that her surrogate mother cannot say the word Amazon. Her mother could never tell her what she truly was. She had to find out herself. And when she says Amazon, Circe makes her say it over and over, making her understand who she truly is.
All right, well, we'll pause it there. We're pretty much at time now, so we might dip back later on in future episodes to continue unpacking what the absolute superhero the absolute DC universe is about, and how the absolute Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman characters are going. But again, one of the things that's interesting is doing these experiments and trying to figure out, okay, so what are my expectations with the superhero text? What are my expectations then if it's an action one, much with Wonder Woman, mythological basis and so forth. All right, so this has been Media Mothership for another week. Keep listening to Edge Radio for some cool tunes. If you'd like to know more about Media Mothership, you can check us out on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and Instagram. And next week we'll be diving more into how media shapes the world around us. So keep listening now to some really cool tunes.